si frigori conficiato.
Hey, ready for random books?
It's random reviews, dude.
Yeah, whatever.
Scarecrow Poetry, a muse of the post-middle age.
Oh, not the poetry book!
Edited by Robert McGovern and Stephen Haven. Published in 1994, this anthology of poems celebrates the mature thoughts of young poets during the 70s and 80s who didn't give in to the demise of youth. And Ink, I know how much you love poetry, so why don't you start us off? No?
What is the point of picking books at random? Why don't we review stuff we like? Stuff we actually want to talk about?
Dude, remember we said that this method of random selection wasn't always going to be fun? Remember we agreed that finding that one literary gem would be worth the price of fishing through a sea of others? Yeah? And just to remind our viewers, art is subjective. If poetry is your thing, this just might be your literary gem. You have nothing to say about this one, do you, Grumpy? Alright, as detailed in the introductory passage, the term scarecrow comes from the poet William Butler Yeats. A direct quote from the book itself, he wrote, moreover, until the end, and demonstrated that while an aged man is but a paltry thing, he could in his later years surpass in perception much of his early verse. Yeats did not give up on writing after his youth, or even middle age, and I think that the examination of poetry of later years finds most poets who are not overcome by the romantic concept, or might not cause the writing drive to flag, are bound to be at the height of their powers in their scarecrow time of life. Powerful and positive message here. I feel a lot of people get hung up on their youth and are quick to forget that with determination and focus that the best years of their life can be ahead of them. Right, Ink?
You're turning 30 next year.
Scarecrow poetry and the poems within this book tackle a number of themes dealing with aging, including but not limited to bodily changes, disintegration or decay, love and sex, aging relationships, memories, healthcare and death.
And did any of the poems mean anything to you? Make you feel anything?
Yeah, some. We'll see how I go putting that all into words though. The first of which, New Year's Day by Philip Appleman. This one was odd as I was sort of on board with the fearless approach to aging by the poem's midpoint. Then I felt kind of blindsided with that final line. But I guess that was intentional. My Friend by Jane Cooper. I reread this one a heap of times because the final line gives off the impression that this poem is like a riddle to solve, the answer being hidden amongst the musical elements of the dialogue. I kind of treated it like a game.
Did you solve it?
Nah. Robert Creeley's O. Upbeat in its delivery, but morbid in its subject matter. I don't know, I kind of appreciated this one. Madeline DeFree's My Time Music. I just kind of like the setting and the feel of this one. A happily married couple of 30 years performing their band for an audience under a gazebo, all amidst a sunset. There's also a pleasant rhythm to the verses which I appreciated. Are you watching TikTok?
Yeah, don't let me stop you. Keep going.
R.P. Dickett at a concert. I know poems can come in all shapes and sizes, but I just appreciated how traditionally this one read, particularly the reoccurring once they were children practicing line. I just wish I better understood the second verse. It was clearly meaningful but difficult to interpret. John Dixon's Confession was actually my favourite piece overall, about an old man admitting to himself how much time he's wasted, or in this case murdered, over the years. This one's great because it plays on the fact that people feel guilty when they waste time, hence the title Confession. In fact, if anyone knows any poems similar to that one, let us know in the comments, please.
Let him know in the comments, please. Don't bother me with that shit.
Doris Headley's Hip Bone. Minimal, but great use of words in this one. Lines like, I have not been so close to my bones in years are just excellent. William Hines' The Ash. A grim look at two old men in their hospital beds and the introspective thoughts of one. The prose is going to stand out to some people. Barbara D. Hollander's Swimming Against the Tide. About an older woman disassociated with the younger ladies in the shower room because of her age. I like the language of this one as well. David Ignatow's 43 was one I found particularly funny, about an elderly man who's lost his wife as well as his car and finds odd excuses to justify the fact that they were as important as each other. XJ Kennedy's Masquerade, about a 40th reunion of a high school class and the type of armour you wear for such an occasion.
What sort of idiot is wearing armour to a school reunion?
Jack Kennedy's Old Men Should Not Write Poems I thought was one of the better examples of this concept of scarecrow poetry. It's this disheartening, fallacious take on what old men should do, much of which is to stew in their self-loathing. And because we know this is sometimes the case for a lot of old men, you want things to be different. And that's just it. They should be different. Survivor's Song by Robert Phillips is one of the better examples exploring the aging relationships concept of scarecrow poetry. The recurring line, "All my good friends have gone away," also hits a little hard for people who are all too familiar with that notion. 17 Ways to Make Sure You're Still Alive by Alberta Turner. Simple and straightforward in its concept, but each of the different ways get even weirder than the last. The recurring "pull off the scab" line was especially vivid and haunting. Cellmates by Harold Witt. Two elderly men, one suffering from a hip replacement and another in the middle of chemotherapy, find solace in referring to their surroundings as a prison. I love the analogy of the VP16 drip being a bag of poison.
You're nearly done, right?
You are the co-host of this thing, dude.
Wait! What do you mean I'm the co-host?
Oh, really? You're the host? You're the host? You do all the work around here?
You're the co-host.
Shut up a minute, man. I'm nearly done. Grace Enters Armageddon by Nancy Meanswright. While this was another I couldn't quite wrap my head around, I was particularly taken by the word choice in some verses. Cows bellows in the corn. White duck legs that won the 39 croquet marathon rooted in the grass like a wicket. And finally, For My Birthday by David Zeiger. A man receives an issue of the New York Times from his daughter dated the day of his birth and reads into the stories as some kind of metaphor for how his own life had panned out. A strong, unique and somewhat comical finish for the book overall, and I'm particularly fond of the line, "Special care instructions warn me to keep these pages from the light, as they are highly subject to deterioration from exposure to atmospheric conditions."
Finally.
Yeah, I appreciate the assistance, dude.
Look, I wasn't taught how to appreciate poetry, so I don't know how.
Well, if you're somebody who does, or at all interested in the concept of scarecrow poetry, have a look at this one. I was going to add something about being interested in poetry about death, but there's a hint in the intro that sort of suggests that all poetry is in some way about death, or at least growing old. What do you think, Ink?
Don't know, don't care. What's that next random book?
George's Antlers. Okay, 32 pages. Nice short story. Are you worried about getting old, Ink?
No.
He's 3,000 years old, he's lying.